Presentation is on characteristics and classifications of wetlands, and with over 80 acres of conservation easement and lots of beautiful wetlands and legacy, this is an appropriate topic for us. There are cupcakes and water in the back. Thank you, Celine.
You're welcome.
Celine was so nice to bake these cupcakes for us today. Pineapple on the far side, strawberry on the close side, bottles of water, help yourself. And I hope you truly enjoy this. I'll have some announcements after, so don't run right out. So today it's my pleasure to introduce Mac Camacho Vieira.
Sure.
She has a long name, but it's lovely. I like how it kind of rings.
Thank you.
But she is a resource educator with Lake County Parks and Resources. She is also president of the Orange County Tarflower Nature Plant Society.
Yeah.
And so I welcome you, and she'll tell you more about herself, and she will give you this wonderful presentation on characteristics and classifications of wetlands. Thank you.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
So you guys are our advanced class, by the way. We discovered in the presentation I gave
Come over
last
here.
month.
Use the mic.
I have a big voice.
Use the mic.
There's two mics there.
It's all fine.
So you guys are our advanced class. You know, we're just bringing these presentations online. We plan to have a library of presentations that we can take out to HOAs and communities, just like this one. The presentation I gave last month included the characteristics of wetlands, right? So actually, you have skipped forward to program 3, which is going to be more about the plants and the animals that you find in those wetlands and some of the adaptations that they have, because you're our advanced class.
Thank you, Veronica.
I just want to make sure.
So thank you for having us. As Ginny mentioned, my name is Mac Camacho Vieira, and I am one of the resource educators for Lake County Water Resources. I'm also the president of the Tarflower chapter, which is in Orange County. And I'll be sharing information based on years of involvement with native plants. Prior to being here in Lake County, I was with Green Owl Gardens, which is a nursery that specializes in native Florida plants, located in Groveland. So if you happen to shop there, I might have seen you. I left there about 2 years ago and went and worked for a company in Kissimmee that was a tourism industry called Boggy Creek Airboat Adventures. I helped them create a butterfly and wildlife habitat there that included adding a variety of native plants to their property. So it was a small theme park and helped them develop that. And now I'm here happily with Lake County Water Authority. So today, as Veronica mentioned, is Learning Journey number 3, our Vital Wetland series. And we're exploring wetland ecosystems. Today we're going to be doing wetland flora, exploring wetland zonation, and adaptations. I'm going to be referencing my notes, and I apologize because as we're developing this library, we have combined several different things. And as Veronica mentioned, this is we've jumped ahead to module 3. So bear with me. Imagine a world without wetlands. No cypress domes teeming with life. No wading birds skimming the shallows. No natural filters cleansing our waters. Wetlands are not just landscapes. They are lifelines. Today, we'll explore the intricate web of life within Florida's wetlands, uncovering the plants and animals that thrive here and the vital services they provide to both nature and people. So water is life. It's a story that tells itself over and over again. There are habitat zones that we follow with our eyes, but they're actually much more intricate and involved than what the eye shows us. From uplands, we have above water lines that can tolerate flooding. The shoreline zones, above water line, but still wet. The emergent zones that go further in about 2 feet of water. And then the deeper zones with the floating and submerged vegetations. Why is this important? Oops, bear with me. There are essential ecosystem services that are provided by wetlands. In thinking about wetlands, we tend to overlook that, possibly. There are provisioning services that happen. Wetlands provide direct resources that humans rely on. For instance, food production. We rely on fish, shellfish, waterfowl, edible plants. Fresh water supplies, natural water storage, and groundwater recharge. Our aquifer depends on this. Raw materials like timber, peat, reeds, and medicinal plants. And genetic resources that provide biodiversity reservoirs benefiting agriculture and medicine. There's great diversity of wetland vegetation. We've got aquatics, grasses, ground covers, rushes, trees, ferns, wildflowers, shrubs, palms, and vines. We'll be discussing these a little bit more, but I wanted to share with you some of the. So eelgrasses, we've all seen eelgrasses, kissimmee grass, lizard's tail, soft rush, bald cypress. We have ferns, other ground covers, cinnamon ferns, swamp milkweeds, American beautyberry, cabbage palm, and fetterbush. What do these things provide us with? Environmental protection, really. They're regulating services. Wetlands help regulate natural processes, improving environmental health. So these plants, even though, yes, it's vegetation, it's aesthetically, we're looking at them, but they actually provide services as well. So wetlands help regulate natural processes, improving environmental health, water purification. They absorb pollutants and excess nutrients. Flood control, store and slow floodwaters, reducing damages, ideally. Climate regulation, with the store of carbon mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. Erosion control, stabilizing shorelines, and preventing soil loss. Pest and disease regulation, support species that naturally control pests. One of the biggest ones, bats, believe it or not, bats need wetland areas in order to thrive. So as we're going through here, again, bear with me as I reference my notes, but we've got aquatic ecosystem services. Everyone is familiar with manatees and the love story that we have with manatees in this area. Eelgrass is an essential nutrient for them. It can grow up to heights of 6 feet. It is a submerged type of vegetation, meaning it's going to be rooted in the water and grows. The niche provides critical habitat and forage. We know that if this grass is present, the water quality is good and we'll have the manatees that come in. What can affect it? Poor water quality and different weather events. So it provides food for manatees, turtles, snails, and many duck species, and provides a nursery or shelter for young fish. Am I speaking at a good pace? You guys good? Grass ecosystem services. Kissimmee grass that you see out looks very much like a rush. It is an emergent plant, providing habitat, forage, and nesting for not only birds, but a lot of other species will come in, like mammals. Some mammals will gather things that they have found, not necessarily in the water, but on the edges of water, and create nesting material for themselves. Another indicator of water quality, shoreline protection and sediment stability. Shoreline protection because the root systems will allow the prevention of erosion. So this ebb and flow that happens as water levels rise and diminish, these are all part of the cycle of life out there. So edges of lakes and wetlands, things like sparrow. This happens to be a little grasshopper sparrow, and they're really quite diminutive. They're really cute. So, but among others, that's just one particular species. And do you know how these guys? So the grass sparrows, if you'll notice, it has thorns on it. It's more than likely a variety of Crataegus, or a type of haw. So these guys, so they'll catch a grasshopper, beat it to submission, and then they will tenderize it on a barbed wire or a thorn. They'll leave it there to bake in the sun. I know this is so gross, but anyway, that's how they tenderize their food. And that's this little sparrow, this diminutive little sparrow, the grasshoppers. So they do that. So kind of an interesting adaptation. So next time you're hiking somewhere and there happens to be either a grasshopper or some sort of insect stuck to it's very likely that it could be one of these sparrows that's their cache of food for whenever they're out next.
Barbecue.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. It's crunchy. So, ground cover ecosystem services, lizard's tail. This plant is a beautiful plant. You'll notice it once you notice its bloom, it's unmistakable once you see it. A little caveat about this plant. It is great in natural areas. In your own yard, you need to be active with it because it can, if you like it, I hope you like it because it will take over, is what I'm saying. It's a great plant though. This is a beautiful wood duck, male, and you will see them. I'm sure I would be surprised if you haven't seen any in this vicinity. What type of ducks have you noticed in this area? Whistling? Oh, good for you. Yeah.
100 of them.
What's that?
The black and white.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Little hens. All right. So this happens to be a male wood duck. You can tell by the coloration. This is likely in its mating season when they are at their showiest. When they're not in that season, they are more subdued. And the females, we just wear basic beige. But the males really show off with their plumage, so good for them. The plants can get up to about 2 feet in height, providing habitat and forage, stabilizes pond edges. As I mentioned, they do grow by rhizomes. They're very thick, and that's how they spread very easily. Just the caveat is cautionary. It's still a very viable plant, and it has a niche. Pollinators love these little blooms, and they do have a slight sweet fragrance to them. So food for wood ducks, shelter for reptiles, amphibians, and insects. So, nice plant. So brush, we've seen this. The Juncus family, they can get quite tall. There are several different varieties, but this particular one can get as tall as 5 feet. It is emergent, providing habitat, forage, and nesting for a variety of things, both by utilizing the stems themselves or by using the actual plant as a habitat. Water quality, shoreline protection, and sediment stability, again, common threads with these. So found in pastures, marshes, and edges of water bodies. Birds and small mammals use it for food. You can see that the seed heads, these are the seed heads. So also the flower. So you want to make sure that you get pollinated. You're going to put your flowers out as far up as you can. So that's an adaptation for survival, so that it makes them attractive. And who wouldn't? If I'm a migrating bird and needed a little rest, I'd probably go rest on that, nibble on a couple things. And this is a marsh hare. So just to indicate little marsh hare that would use that. Tree ecosystem services, and the selected plant that we're going to emphasize are bald cypress. 75 feet, I would say they can go well beyond that, up beyond 75 feet. Found along shorelines. I mentioned in the opening, if you've never seen a cypress stand and seen how much wildlife can be just observed in just even the smallest of these cypress stands, you can imagine that how well they provide habitat and forage. Again, water quality, shoreline protection, and sediment stability. You'll find them along swamps, rivers, streams, and creeks, but, you know, we humans like to place things in places that we wouldn't normally. So occasionally you will find them in the most strangest of places because we're trying to control a habitat. And some people have great success in putting them in a low lying area of their property, not necessarily adjacent to water, but I have seen some people who try and create a quasi kind of wetland for them by running their irrigation so that they have that. So totally different type of setup than you would normally see in nature, but they're trying to create habitat. So birds and squirrels use it, among many other things. Migrating birds love them. They're scenic, they're romantic looking, especially with all the Spanish moss that we see. Amphibians and catfish use the nooks and crannies on the bottoms as shelter. We spoke about ferns. This happens to be one of our beautiful, that's okay, so disregard this slide because the information on it, I just realized, is duplicate and incorrect. It's not a bald cypress. This is actually a cinnamon fern. So cinnamon ferns can get quite tall. Sometimes they can get as tall as myself, and I'm about 6 feet tall, with a broad reach of about 3 feet. You do find them near shorelines, not necessarily right in the water, but close adjacent to water areas. They do have the source of water quality and sediment stability. You'll find them along swamps, streams, and lakes. They offer actually nesting material, not just food for other things, but they offer nesting material. This is in fluorescence. Some of it is in fluorescence, meaning flower, and some of it is actually the vegetation itself, the leaf structures themselves. They will use both. So nesting material for small birds. That is correct. I apologize for the slide. Wildflower ecosystem services. There are a variety of milkweeds, two of them which are known to be relatively aquatic. The pink swamp milkweed, the Asclepia incarnata, can grow up to 3.5 to 4 feet. Best known for hosting, being the larval host for monarchs. They are also larval hosts for the queen butterfly, this little cousin to the monarch, the queen. I know the monarchs get all the accolades, but I'm an actual fan of the queen butterflies. I think they're super cute. Instead of 2 antennae in the front, they have 3. They have 2, 2, and 2. So, found along shorelines or anywhere that really they can get a foothold of moisture, providing habitat and forage. So you can imagine that not only are butterflies attracted to these blooms, many other pollinators are going to be attractive to it. So floodplains, hydric hammocks, wet pine flatwoods, and marshes. Monarch butterflies / queens. Shelter for butterfly eggs. Shrub ecosystem services. American beautyberry, which is a fairly common, sorry if I keep moving out of the range. American beautyberry, which is a fairly common native plant that's utilized ornamentally because it's a nice shrub. It bears these beautiful flowers, clusters of flowers. It is deciduous, but it gives us the gift of these beautiful, beautiful berries, which are so visible and aesthetic during the winter months. They offer food for a variety of different animals. It is, they can get up to 8 feet, a little bit taller sometimes, provide habitat and forage. Larval host plant for a couple different little critters. So a butterfly, bear with me. The spring azure butterfly and the snowberry clearwing moth. So both of those things. It's an upland plant, so it grows typically further away from the water, but still does well in moist areas. We've covered it all. Okay. I wanted to say one ethnobotanical thing about this, and in the future I'll make sure I mention more of these ethnobotanical points of interest. So Calicarpa americana, there's a story about a gentleman in Miami. Miami's not that old. It's maybe about 100 years old, really. So there used to be a hotelier, a gentleman who had a hotel down there, and each time someone checked in to the hotel, he would provide them with a lotion that was made from Calicarpa americana, or this beautyberry. It has a antihistamine property in it. The leaves, if you take a leaf, if you're out in the wild, take a leaf, macerate it, use the oils on your skin, it is a mosquito deterrent. So this man, pre-labeling and ingredients and everything else, was being the benefactor to his guests of this wonderful lotion that hopefully kept the mosquitoes at bay for them without them even really knowing. It also makes a beautiful jam or jelly, which I'm rather fond of. You have to take the berries, and it's a process. It's not super complicated, but it is somewhat lengthy. But it creates this beautiful jam or jelly or syrup that it requires pectin or sugar to do it well, but it's quite good. And you can actually find that beautyberry jam or jelly out there. So not only food for birds and small mammals. Yeah. It was a highly utilized pioneer food source. Palm ecosystem services, cabbage palms, another beautiful native. They can get quite tall, up to 100 feet. Upland, similar in range to the Calicarpa americana or the beautyberry. The niche that they provide, habitat, nesting, and forage. So these beautiful, and this is indicative of really of any and most palms. The foliage, or even when you trim a plant, the frond areas, those provide homes for hummingbirds, bats, a variety of different birds will nest in those little crooks and crannies. So it does provide shelter. Frogs, yes. Birds and bats. So as I mentioned, another really cool thing about these guys is that if you like heart of palm, which is very controversial because when you take a palm, the typical palm, you have to, unfortunately, sacrifice the tree. Cabbage palms aren't like that. You can actually take the very top of the palm without sacrificing the actual tree. So it's a sustainable forage plant that can be utilized. Again, we're talking about hard times. We're talking about survival food kind of situations. So they are very cold hardy, which is another really cool thing about them. Vine Ecosystem Services. Oh, I didn't mention, obviously this is a little ruby-throated. Yes, thank you. Beautiful little. Vine Ecosystem Services. Climbing fetterbush. They can get quite tall. Beautiful, beautiful. So these blooms look like little bells, very similar to I'm sorry? That, yes. And also like a blueberry. Blueberry blooms look very similar to this. There's another plant that's in the same kind of genre that's called Lyonia. So all of these have these type of blooms that are leading down like that, attract very specific little pollinators that will help them pollinate. It's a larval host plant for the Okefenokee Zale moth. That's what this is, the Okefenokee Zale moth. One of the wonderful things about nature is that these things are happening. All of this is going off without our approval or anything. This is just happening. I find that beautiful in a world that is so chaotic and controlling in so many different ways. The fact that they're wired to, okay, we're just going to go do our thing, regardless of whatever else is going on. So kudos to nature. Swamps, highlands, mixed forests, and sandhills, pollinators and birds. So they will vary up a little bit, and the birds like that, sometimes they'll, of course, birds being so dependent on insects, a lot of times because all of the pollinators are enjoying this, that's the symbiotic relationship with all of this. So shelter for birds and larvae. So some wetland adaptations that we've discussed in the past in previous modules: adventitious roots, hydric adventitious roots, and shallow roots. What's the purpose? Oxygen. We want to make sure we have oxygen. So, read this real quick. Adventitious roots grow from underwater stems to help plants absorb oxygen and water. Examples of these would be red mangrove. Hydric adventitious roots grow from stems or trunks when the soil is flooded, providing an alternate way for the plant to breathe. An example of this is the large flower primrose or Ludwigia that inhabits the areas. Shallow roots grow near the water surface to access oxygen. So this is an example for the bald cypress. Now there is a great deal of speculation. Do they actually use that for oxygen exchange? Or is it a buttress stabilizer to assist with, because the structure of cypress trees, some of them can be as wide or wider than this table. So is it necessary for them to then have these other root systems that kind of help with that to stave off any potential, It's rare to see a cypress tree falling over. Very rare. So maybe we should start looking at those models for home building. We should look at that, see how we can stabilize our homes a little bit better. Anyway. Wetland adaptations, leaves, floating leaves, such as this beautiful lily, fragrant lily, inflated leaves that allow to kind of surf on the water, if you will. And not only they're not just sessile there, they're not just there, they're attracting, this is a landing pad for many a frog or a bird resting, so all these things contribute to each other. Floating leaves have a thick cuticle that prevents water from penetrating, allowing the leaves to float on the water surface. Inflated leaves have spongy tissues that provide buoyancy and store oxygen. So wetland adaptations, once again, stems, different stem types, elongated stems, buttressed trunks, as we were mentioning with the cypress trees, and erynchyma. So the buttressed, elongated stems allow plants to keep their above ground parts above water during flooding. And this is an example, this is a pickerel weed. Buttressed trunks are wide with swollen bases that help trees stand upright in the water, such as the bald cypress example. Their erynchyma are air pockets, and I'll have a better illustration next time, but essentially if you can imagine a cross section of a wetland plant, it'll be, if you can imagine a straw, okay, a hollow straw. However, imagine that you have hundreds of little tiny straws within that straw. If you can imagine that visually. So that's an erynchyma. It has air pockets within it to add to the rigidity of the plant for it to be able to to have a telescoping kind of reach to keep the blooms. Again, it's all about survival and who can pollinate me and how can I make sure that the next generation, the progeny, are, I'm accessible to things. So that's why the elongated stems, the buttress trunks, and the parenchyma are so important. So parenchyma are air pockets inside stems that help plants exchange gases. The old plants are an example of that. And then almost through here, let's see. These hypertrophied lenticels are large pores on stems and roots that help oxygen exchange. And we've seen those on wax myrtle. This is wax myrtle. This happens to be a female wax myrtle. It's a very valued pioneer plant. It was actually, these berries were used to make candles. Lengthy process because you'd have to boil and then extrude the wax from the, and then process that to make the candles. But it beats being in the dark if that's all that's all you had. This is also a good plant to know about if you're in the wilderness and get stung by something. Now we've heard about the Calocarpa americana, the beautyberry, which you can use to stave off mosquitoes, okay? And it is as simple as grabbing a leaf, rubbing it between your fingers, and then placing that oil on your skin. The wax myrtle, by contrast, once you've already been bitten, and I know this sounds kind of gross, but you would take a leaf or two, chew it, and place it like a poultice on whatever sting you have. It has a almost not like Novocaine, but it has an effect that will draw out the toxin potentially and issue some relief because it spreads out a little bit of natural antihistamine to the area where it makes contact. So just a couple, if you're in the wild.
And then you gotta find somewhere about red ants.
What's that?
Red ants.
Well, red ants are,
No.
they require a lot more, but I mean.
Poison ivy?
Poison ivy, you have to have I'd stick to you can try it.
Right.
You can try it, but some of those things are best left to chamomile and Benadryl.
Which is an antihistamine.
Yes, exactly.
So.
Exactly. Well, you could. I have not tried it with red ants, but fire ants. But
I don't want to even try it.
if someone does, please let me know. I'll add it to my notes. And then pneumatophores are modified root systems that sometimes grow above the ground and help plants breathe. An example of black mangrove. So this is a list of citations, and I just wanted to share a couple more things. Cultural services, human and social benefits of aquatic vegetation. Beyond their environmental functions, wetlands enrich human experiences by offering recreation and tourism, birdwatching, fishing, kayaking, ecotourism. There are some cultural services that are provided in the way of spiritual and cultural significance of wetlands. They've gotten a really bad rap because they were sold off as kind of trash properties. But in a lot of cultures, they have sacred symbolism. Wetlands do. Sacred sites and full of indigenous knowledge. Education and research. These are living laboratories for ecological and climate studies. Aesthetic and well-being, natural spaces, enhance mental health and our quality of life. There are These services sustain the entire ecosystem. Nutrient recycling, converting and recycling essential nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. Soil formation, organic matter that builds fertile, wet soils. Primary production that support vast amounts of biomass and food webs. Habitat for biodiversity, crucial for breeding, feeding, and nesting grounds, and migrating birds and other things. You know, these are niches that are so specific that support such wide variety of life. So I just wanted in closing to say that, again, wetlands are much more than just water and plants. They're the pulse of Florida's ecosystems. They shape biodiversity, protecting shorelines, and sustaining life in ways we often take for granted. They purify our water, shield us from floods, store carbon, and support an incredible variety of life. As we move forward, hopefully we'll recognize their value and become better stewards of these irreplaceable habitats. Because when we protect wetlands, we actually protect our future. So thank you very much for having us here. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and we look forward to seeing you again in one capacity or another. So thank you very much. Anybody questions or comments?